We're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There he is. He's out there.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh.
All right, action items. There are no action items. The next item on is information items, and Mr. Beardsley has the first one, which is the SAP S4 HANA update.
Yep.
Mike?
All right. I make sure I'm live here. Okay, it's all right. Just want to make sure it's working. All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. So this is a presentation to describe our SAP upgrade roadmap. It'll give you a sense of kind of where we are today, give you some background and where we're headed and why we're contemplating this project. So that's our full agenda. Again, a little bit of background. We'll talk about the drivers that are behind this project, give you a sense of the analysis that we performed to kind of get here and make some of the decisions that form our roadmap, give you a sense of what that overall timeline looks like, the benefits, the cost analysis, and so forth. The key thing I want to point out is that we're discussing the transition from the SAP system that we run today, which is SAP ECC, to the future version, which is called SAP S4HANA. So when you hear me say SAP ECC, that's the current version. I'm going to say this again so you don't forget. And then again, the future version is S4HANA. So a little bit of background. We implemented the current version that we're on, ECC, back in 2014. That took over about 30 months to implement, and it was at a cost of approximately $20 million. Some of you may remember a little bit about that project. Very challenging project, very difficult. One of the most difficult things I think that Loudon Water has ever done, probably. But in the end, it's been a big success for us. It has provided a platform for us to build on and innovate around over the last 8+ years. So it's been very successful for us. And the last note on this slide is that we've made some changes over the years. We upgrade SAP every year. One of the most significant changes we made was back in 2018, which was 4-ish years after we went live. We did a significant upgrade, a somewhat significant upgrade, and then we also moved SAP from our on-premise data center to the Microsoft Azure cloud. So we run SAP today in the cloud, so to speak. All right, so just kind of keep that sort of background in mind. So what does SAP do for us? This gives you a sense of the scope of what SAP is for Loudon Water. It is a true ERP system. It does all of these major business functions. It's at kind of the core of all these functions. So it's finance, procurement, inventory management. It's our HR system. It runs payroll. It is our end-to-end customer service system. It's the system that generates the bills and receives the payments. It tracks all of our assets, all of our capital projects, all of our work orders. All of that is tightly integrated within the SAP system. In other organizations, all of those might be separate systems that have to be maintained and upgraded separately and paid for and everything that kind of goes into that. For us, that's all one system. So that's a huge advantage. It creates some challenges as well, but that's one of the most powerful things about SAP. In addition to that, over the years, we've integrated SAP with a number of other systems, and that's what you're seeing kind of on the right there, that graphic. So we've integrated our GIS, our mapping system with SAP. We have our customer portal, LW Connect, which is also integrated with SAP. Our mobile work order application that our field service workers use and our maintenance workers use in the field to track work orders and so forth is also tightly integrated with SAP. And one other one I'll mention is our business intelligence system, which is where we get a lot of our advanced reports and analytics and data visualization. That also draws heavily from SAP. So all of those things are really enabled by having this powerful SAP platform in place. So that's kind of the foundation of what SAP does for us today.
Mike, you had said it's a true ERP.
Yeah.
What is that?
So ERP is a industry term for enterprise resource planning.
Okay.
And basically think enterprise software that integrates multiple business functions into one unified platform.
And
That's
this
what
is
it
all
means.
customized for our needs.
It is all customized for our needs. That's correct. Yes.
Which is amazing.
Whoops, I went the wrong way. So there's a couple of things that are really drivers for contemplating a significant upgrade at this time. The first one is that the database software that SAP runs on is end of life in 2026, so three years away. So that's the first milestone. Yes.
Can you explain why a database would have an end of life? Is it they're not going to support it anymore?
So it's actually the software itself is Microsoft SQL Server, and it's the version of it is, I think, SQL Server 2016, and they generally have a 10-year life cycle, after which Microsoft wants you to upgrade the database software. So the data itself, that's fine, but the software that runs the database is actually end of life. SQL Server, yep. And that's one of the most popular database platforms out there. But again, they typically have a 10-year life cycle. We're approaching that life cycle. And we've upgraded it previously. This is now one of the next upgrades we would have to go through.
So do we know that they're ending support for it in 2026?
We do. Yes,
Okay,
we
they've
do.
already
Yep.
broadcast.
And so what that means is that there are no bug fixes after that point. There's no support from Microsoft. And crucially, there are no security patches available after that date, right? So that becomes kind of a drop dead thing. You've got to do something before that date. And that's true for a couple of these other points as well. So in 2027, something similar happens with the Microsoft operating system that SAP runs on top of. It becomes end of life at that same date. And again, no bug fixes, no security patches. That's particularly important for an operating system. You have to be up to date. You need to patch security. There's always new vulnerabilities that are being discovered, and you need to be protected against them. So it's important to upgrade before those things happen. So 2026 and 2027, just for those two things are important. But then in 2027 also, the SAP ECC version is end of mainstream support is what I'm showing there. And that means that SAP ends anything but bug fixes are no longer available. So SAP still supports it in 2027 until 2030, but they're not making any changes or improvements to it. They'll only fix it if it breaks. And then in 2030, that's the drop dead date that SAP has published. And that's where SAP ECC is true end of life. So again, that means no longer will be supported by SAP, no additional security fixes, et cetera. So the key things you can see here is we have to do something by 2026 and 2027, at least for the database platform and the operating system. And then we have to do something presumably again by 2030 or combine all those things. And we'll talk about which path we've chosen here. But those are the real drivers behind why we need to contemplate an upgrade and why we've gone through an assessment process. Some further things here, of course, SAP is really not innovating on the SAP ECC platform anymore. All of their investments are going to the new S/4HANA platform. So we've really seen a diminishment in new capabilities with what we're running today. That's where they're pushing all of their customers.
So is HANA available right now?
HANA is available right now. Yep. And I'll talk a little bit more about the history of HANA here. And so SAP is really making an aggressive push to get their customers on the S/4HANA platform and off of ECC. That's where their investments really are. Any more questions on this slide before I move on? Try again. There we go. So a little bit about S/4HANA. It is the next generation of SAP. So S4 is literally sort of the major version numbers. There have been 1, 2, and 3. We're essentially on 3. That's not how it's branded, but that's essentially what we're on today. That's what S4 means. So it's that next generation. The HANA platform has actually been around since 2010-ish. But wasn't really fully available until about 2015. So if you're going to ask, well, why didn't we pick it and adopt it the first time? It wasn't available when we implemented SAP. It wasn't ready at all.
I hope this isn't the road to HANA.
No, it's not. So it comes with a number of significant changes. One of the things they really brand around it is simplification and ease of use. SAP is kind of a clunky platform to use, and so this is something that SAP is really focused on. That helps us because just with onboarding and training, it certainly reduces the amount of time it takes for knowledge transfer and getting folks up to speed and getting them effective. So those are some benefits that we would see. There are particular changes that are associated with the finance module. So that's actually one of the ones that changes the most. It simplifies the most. The interface changes a little more. And then that's also true with the customer service area. So that's one other major module that we use that's going to change a little bit more than some of the other modules. Some of the modules don't change much at all, and we will have to do very little to kind of adopt the new changes in S/4HANA. So there are a few other things. We expect to see improved performance. The underlying technology is what's called an in-memory database. Performance isn't really an issue for us much today, so we won't see a great deal of gain from this, but we'll see some improvements. We'll see improvements, as it notes there, around integration and innovation, because again, this is where SAP is putting all of their money. Not only that, but as we adopt other solutions that are non-SAP, we won't be able to integrate them with the current system because nobody's building integrations for the current version. They're really building around S/4HANA, right? So it really makes sense for us in the future to be on the S/4HANA platform for that reason. Unlike in the past, this next one, unlike in the past, SAP now offers a full cloud software as a service solution. So you can basically kind of push all your chips in and say, SAP, we want you to host this entire SAP environment for us. So that's now an option.
As opposed to Microsoft?
As opposed to, so Microsoft runs the infrastructure for us today, but then we've had to hire a third party to help us manage that infrastructure because it's a big SAP environment. So that's what we do today. We have multiple contractors that are engaged to help us manage the environment. In the future, it would be, most of it would be on SAP to manage. So that would be a significant change. The other option would be to actually bring it back in and put it in our data center, which we would not recommend. And then the last point there is that this pushes out the end of life for SAP to 2040. Probably, frankly, beyond what we've seen in the past is that sometimes SAP will push dates out for something like this. I expect that to move out even further, but certainly to 2040, which certainly extends the life of our system. This graphic here kind of gives you a sense of the continuum of maturity that this pushes us along. So I think we're somewhere between the integrated, complex, and sophisticated, probably more sort of in the sophisticated area when it comes to our use of this integrated system. And this pushes us further along towards this intelligent utility of the future. Some of this is marketing speak, so don't fall for it completely. But it does really allow us to advance, integrate, innovate, take advantage of new technologies that emerge, whereas we will be stagnant if we stay on the older system. Okay, so a little bit about the process that we've gone through to get here. There's a lot of complexity to consider when we look at our different options for upgrading, for phasing, et cetera. So we've engaged with an outside consultant, a company called Utegration. They're under contract to us today. They provide us with SAP support services and have for several years. So we went through a pretty extensive project over the last year to basically take a look at where we are today and where we think we want to be. And that involved a series of workshops internally with our internal business groups to talk about their pain points, areas that might be optimized, how they're using the system today, what they want to be able to do in the future, what we might kind of want to re-engineer as part of this upgrade. We also looked at certain applications within SAP and outside of SAP that are coming end of life that need to be kind of folded into this plan. And then also as part of all this, we did a number of demonstrations of the new S/4HANA platform. So again, to give the business a sense of what's coming and how things will change for them, what this is going to look like. So the business has a good sense of how this will affect them, what the change looks like when we adopt S/4HANA.
Does it look substantially different from a?
So, yeah. Sorry, say that
From
again.
like graphic interface? I mean,
It does, yes. There's a kind of an overlying graphical interface technology that significantly simplifies how you interact with SAP. So that's a major improvement.
It's chatbot.
So yeah, that's a great point of speculation. I wasn't going to say something like that unless somebody brought this up. But this is one of those innovation things that we think about when we adopt a technology like this. You know, you've probably heard a lot about artificial intelligence, Chat GPT. There's a number of other artificial intelligence and machine learning type technologies that are really emerging in the marketplace. Those aren't going to be available in SAP ECC. I expect to see that sort of thing become integrated with SAP S/4HANA and other technologies like Microsoft. You know, those are going to roll out if you stay current. But if you stay behind, it's going to be much harder to take advantage of some of those things. So good question.
Mike, Mr. Koblis has a question.
Yes.
Morning, everybody. When we first heard about SAP, they were going to have a project management block that was going to be purchased, and I think we actually did purchase it, but we don't use it. Are we still not going to use it? Is that's not still in the forecast, or what?
Yeah, Mr. Koblis, so we do use the SAP project management module. We mostly use it for tracking capital project finances, and then we use it end to end for tracking all of our land development projects. And then we do have, I think you're aware, we also have some other technologies that we use for construction project management, such as Procore. And then there's a separate initiative for our project support office, which we can discuss separately if you're interested. But that's how we're planning. That's how we use SAP today, and that is we'll continue to use it that way in the future.
Okay, I was just curious. Yeah, and maybe offline sometime we could talk about how what's being done with construction, et cetera. I was just curious, that's all.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Let's see, previous slide. So just a couple of additional points here. In looking at this project that we've gone through, this analysis, we've also looked at a number of different options for implementation. So as it notes there, we have some different options to examine for phasing. You know, how do we want to chunk this out? Do we want to do it all at once? Do we want to phase it into sort of different buckets and kind of spread the pain out a little bit? So those are some options to look at. There's also the cloud versus on-premise, or really sort of the all-in cloud approach with SAP, or more of the model that's very similar to what we do today, where we're hosting it in Microsoft, but we're involved in managing it. So there's a couple of options there to consider. And then also the timing of this. We could delay this somewhat, or we can choose to tackle it sooner. There are some pros and cons to both approaches. And so we've weighed all of that out. We've also kind of weighed out the do nothing approach. What if we just ran SAP to failure? And we can discuss that a little bit more. There's reasons why that's not really an option, but we've looked at that as an option. So we've kind of examined all these things. We've done the cost analysis, the pros and cons. And in the end, our preferred approach is the one that's noted there, which is the S/4HANA upgrade starting in the 2024 and spanning through approximately 2026 timeframe, with a phased approach. So not a kind of all in big bang, which is something we did previously. We would phase this. And we are looking to go kind of all in on the SAP cloud option, their software as a service option, which is called SAP RISE. So I'll describe a little bit more about what that looks like and that timeline here in the next slide. So this is our overall roadmap. This will give you a sense of how this would sort of play out. In 2022, as I mentioned, we've been working on this roadmap, doing the analysis. 2023, so this year, we'll be working on some readiness improvements. And those are things that we know we have to do to get the system ready to upgrade to S/4HANA. There are things like some data cleanup work, some code optimization and fixes to ensure that the customizations we have in place will carry over to S/4HANA. There's some changes we want to make with our business processes to get ready. So all those things will be worked on in 2023. In addition, we'll be working on developing and issuing an RFP for upgrade services for a vendor. So that vendor will essentially guide us through and help us through this whole process. And there's still a lot of work to do when you're moving from SAP ECC to S/4HANA. We've got to migrate our data from one system to the other. We've got to configure the new system. So there are some configuration changes that will need to be made, particularly in the finance and customer service areas. There's customizations that'll need to be made. There is some optimization that we want to do. We'll have to train our staff. We need to integrate with other third-party non-SAP applications in the new S/4HANA platform. And then we need to prepare our team members, do all the testing, and then post-go live support. So that's all in scope for the contractor that will help us migrate from SAP ECC to S/4HANA. So that's 2023, that's the RFP, and that will come back to the board for approval. Then assuming approval and so forth, in 2024, we would actually start the S/4HANA upgrade. And this will get essentially chunked out into two pieces. The first one in 2024 is what we call the SAP Core, and that's pretty much everything that's not customer service, right? So that's finance, procurement, HR, inventory management, assets, work orders, all those other things I mentioned. So that's the first big piece. And then there's just a natural breakpoint with SAP there between that and the customer service components. So then the customer service components would be done in 2025. And so we would wrap that up near the end of 2025, early 2026. And then that would be followed by a period of sort of post-go live enhancements, improvements, and optimizations over the following 3+ years or so. So that's the time where we would do any really significant business process changes. I should point out that while there are some significant changes, there is work here. This is more of a technical upgrade than it is a rewrite or a re-engineering of our business processes. That's kind of an important point because that's really hard. But our processes are pretty well set today. We've established that through the analysis we did last year. So we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We're looking to take most of what we have and move it to S/4HANA, make some improvements, change what needs to be changed, but largely adopt the existing processes. That reduces our risks. All right, so let me move on to the next one.
Like you could actually just move over to S/4HANA without making any changes. It's a good opportunity to do it, but you could do it.
Mostly, yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. That's mostly correct. Yeah. So there's a couple areas that do change, like the finance area. That's changing no matter what. And so we're going to have to make some changes. The underlying database structure is actually changing somewhat. So some of the processes, the reporting, and so forth are going to change. And the same is true for the customer service area. But we can take our existing processes there and use them as a reference, right? This is how it works today. Most of that process really should translate over. We're not going to have to make very large changes. Yeah. And we're not starting from scratch. You know, when we did this back in 2012, 13, and 14, we didn't know what we didn't know. We really were reinventing things from the ground up. And that's just not the case here. You know, we know a lot more about how SAP works. So a couple of the key benefits of moving forward with this S/4HANA upgrade on the SAP Cloud RISE platform. Some of this is sort of reiterating some things I mentioned, but it provides that platform for continued innovation and integration. It's going to streamline certain things. Again, in finance in particular, that's one actually area of improvement. So Brian and Sally benefit from that in particular. That's also true in the customer service areas I've mentioned. We'll see some reporting and interface improvements. Again, that'll help get our staff up to speed when we have turnover or just changes in position. It pushes out the end of life for SAP past my retirement date, which I'm grateful for. And then it continues to help us maintain our security posture. And that's really important, right? We're building a foundation that's always going to be up to date. This is one of the things that really undermines organizations when they get attacked with ransomware, whatever vulnerabilities there are. It's often because they don't keep their software up to date. So that's one of the things we really focus on as an organization, is making sure that our software is up to date across the board. There's a couple of key points that I have here, which I'll spend a few minutes on, and it's really the why now. So the first one is by doing this now, by starting in 2024 and 2025, rather than kind of waiting, we could do some lower cost technology upgrades to the database and the operating system. We could do that now or in the next year or so. And then we could wait till closer to 2030 to do this. But if we do that, we're kind of wasting that investment because we would have to do that upgrade, but then we would still have to upgrade to S/4HANA a few years later. And so that seems like an unnecessary expense when it comes to doing that upgrade. To us, it makes sense to just kind of start a little bit earlier and not have to go through that extra upgrade process. So that's one benefit of starting earlier, is that it avoids that technology upgrade. That's probably of lesser importance than the other 2 points that I want to make here. The second one is that this avoids a coming resource crunch that we anticipate as we get closer to 2027, 2028, 2029, when all other SAP customers that haven't started early will be seeking to do this. And we see this coming. We've been following SAP's metrics and how many customers had moved versus how many still have to move. There's a big wave coming. And they're not as prepared. They really look like they're waiting until much closer to the end. So what that means for us is implementation prices will rise as there's more contention for resources. And it will be less likely that we're going to get somebody's A team, right? We're going to get somebody's B team or C team possibly, just because there won't be as many expert resources available to help us through this kind of upgrade. So that's another reason why we think it makes sense for us to move a little earlier when we're ready. My third point, which I think for me personally is the most important and the one I think I want to emphasize the most is our internal readiness is high. And I mean this for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're at a point, we've gone through this process with the business and from a change management standpoint, they're behind this. They've been through the workshops, they've been through the demonstrations. There's some excitement behind this. Or at least cautious optimism, I would say, right? So there's support for this, and that's really important. These projects are difficult. They affect all aspects of the organization in ways that many other projects do not. So it's really important to have internal buy-in and support. It's an important part of change management, and so we have that support now. The organization is pretty well prepared for this. And then some other follow-on points to that. Our business users are really experts at this stage in SAP. So we want to make sure that we take advantage of that. But not only that, we have our own internal team of, I'll say they're sort of our ACE or crack SAP experts, which is a really huge advantage for us. So I'll ask Mark Guanco in the back there to raise his hand. Mark is our Director of Business Solutions within the IT team, and he leads a team of, we call them solution managers, but they're SAP experts and business analysts. And in many cases, they've been working with and on our SAP environment since we went live. Mark was actually part of our original implementation, and several of the other team members in there were as well. So we have this expert team available to us. We have an excellent project manager who led us through this effort, the roadmap effort last year, and is going to lead us through this overall implementation. That's Laura Bowers. She also worked on the original implementation. I know she's online listening. She worked on the original implementation and has led some of our most difficult and complex projects. So we're really well prepared in a way, frankly, that we weren't when we did this back in 2012, 2013, 2014. I think our team would be the envy of any organization that has to go through something like this. And we don't want to take that readiness for granted, right? You never know how long people are going to be available to work on something like this. We kind of want to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak.
Mike, is there a danger of going too soon? I know when new products are rolled out, they're buggy.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that first group because you're just pulling your hair. You want to wait to that sweet spot where things have been ironed out, but before the rush comes in. Is that our time frame fit in for that?
I think our time frame is excellent for that. So the version of SAP that came out that we thought was ready for us was not 2015. Actually, it's more like 2018 or 2019 before it's mature enough, I think, for us to adopt. They've continued to make improvements to us, to the SAP S/4HANA platform, and we've seen a big uptick in SAP customers move to S/4HANA and to their cloud solution, particularly over the last year or two. So we're not going to be first. We're going to be right in that a leader, but not on the bleeding edge, and that's not a place I typically enjoy being. Yeah. So good question.
Are there any lessons learned from those others who've already gone through it? best practices, lessons learned?
Yeah, so we've had we've talked with SAP and our consultants about, what can we learn through this process? And part of our roadmap process has been to help us understand, what those different options are, what things should we avoid. We've run a number of analytical tools against our SAP system as part of this roadmap effort to help us avoid some of those blind spots. Yeah, so we feel like we're going to be able to make good use of all the lessons learned that are out there. Yeah, this is now, 3 years ago, this is not all that well baked a process. It is today. This is a pretty well-known thing that other customers have gone through.
Another question I'm sure I ask is, as a bank, as a customer service organization, we have certain standards of controls that we go through, and we get software, SOC 1, SOC 2, I'm sure you're familiar with them. Is there service organization controls? Is there something equivalent to that with SAP? Are there certain kind of controls or compliance that you have to go through?
Yeah, so those actually, the SOC 2, and then there's multiple other security certifications that come along with the SAP Cloud Platform. And actually, they're an advancement beyond even the ones that we have in place today. So I feel like we're making a step forward from a security and a compliance framework standpoint, but those will be in place with the SAP platform that we adopt. Yeah.
Any risk of any downtime in any of the areas?
So typically with a major upgrade like this, we would expect to see a weekend downtime as we transition from the old system to the new. That'll probably happen twice because we'll have the core downtime and then the customer service, but those will be, a year-ish apart, right? So those would be the major transition downtimes. We do regular maintenance now, and typically that's not terribly impactful. Now, typically that's done on the weekend, Sunday night, and we're down for a couple hours. And the major impact that our customers see is that the customer portal is temporarily down. You can actually make a payment, but it doesn't link directly with SAP during that downtime.
Mr. Byers, was your question addressed, sir?
It was. Thank you, Joel.
You're welcome. I also wanted to acknowledge that Mr. Bonfils has been on the call today as well.
So unless there's any questions there.
Just one other, Mike, if you decide to go to SAP host, whatever they RISE, I guess they call it, right? Is there a danger to have everything all in one place if there was a crash and you lose everything? Or
that's where the power. So we have that risk today, but I actually think that's there's less risk of that than any other approach, frankly. I think there's sometimes this misconception about, if you go all in on a cloud solution that you're putting all your eggs in one basket, but with a properly designed cloud solution, you're actually, I think, reducing risk, because when it's properly designed, you have good backups, disaster recovery, high availability architecture, redundant databases, clustering, all the technologies that make a system robust and improve uptime and ensure that if there's a compromise, a security compromise, a ransomware attack, et cetera, that it can be easily recovered, often from a data center that's 1,000 miles away. And that's actually how our system is architected today. If there was a major fire in the Microsoft Azure data center where our system is hosted today, it would actually come up in the Microsoft West region, which is out near Denver somewhere. That's where our backup data center is located, so to speak. So again, a good architecture, and that's how SAP is designed. I've read their architecture for their RISE approach. It's pretty similar to what we do today, which is pretty robust. So this slide shows the investments. The first line item there is the readiness improvements that are planned today. And these are all in the capital. They're all in the CIP and the spending plan, or they're in the operating budget. So that first one is planned improvements, readiness improvements for this year for $170K. Then the overall S/4HANA upgrade and transition costs in the 2024 to 2026 timeframe, approximately $9 million. And these are based on inputs from the contractors that we work with, right? So these are, we have some outside validation for these numbers. And then the SAP RISE Cloud annual services is 1.37 million. And then on top of that, SAP support services, which is something we do today and we would continue with, is about $350K a year. So the total CapEx shown there over this time period, 9.17 million. And again, the future annual OpEx for SAP is 1.72 million. And just to contrast, if you have that question, our current OpEx for SAP is about 1.17 million. So it's a little over 500K and change. So that more, correct, right. So we've worked through that process. That's a bit of a jump. It is a couple of years away, so we have time to plan for it and bake it into our operating budget. I'll just keep in mind that, again, this is, in other organizations, this might be 10 different systems that we would pay for individually. It kind of all rolls together for us. So while it is a large number, it's, we're paying a significant amount today, but that's part of our operating budget.
Where is that 500,000 embedded in? Is it in the RISE?
It's in the RISE,
Okay.
correct. Yep.
Mike, Mr. Byers has a question, and
Yes.
Mr. Koblis.
Yes.
Yeah, Mike, it's Bill. Of the $9.17 million, I guess the 9 million is the number I'm looking at. And this might be a question better answered by the gentleman sitting next to you. How much of this is expensed and is any of it capitalized over a period of time?
All of the 9 million will be capitalized, and I think we typically do some IT systems over like 15 years or so. So about 9 million over 15 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Koblis?
Mike, this is near and dear to my heart. And when I see round numbers of 9 million up there, I cringe because if you remember, our budget was 10 million and then it went to 20 million rather quickly when we first implemented SAP. I just want to be assured that the 9 million or whenever the actual number comes in, that it's an upset number, not something that they can add on as they did last time. And I'm sure it's going to be an hourly because I think that's how we do things. But I just want to make sure that we have some protection in there so that SAP can't do what they did to us last time.
Yeah, so a couple of things. We've learned a lot of lessons in the last 8 years. That project is near and dear to my heart as well. I know I personally learned a great deal from it at great cost and expense. So we're not going to make, I think, some of those mistakes this time around. This would not be an hourly contract. I would see this as a lump sum type approach with defined milestones. So I think there are several other ways in which we would ensure that we're contractually protected from unexpected cost increases throughout this process. This is also a very different project from the original implementation. I mentioned that this is more technical than it is a business process reengineering. I was trying to think of a good analogy for this. When we went from the older systems that we implemented back in 2012 through 14, it's kind of like going from riding a bike to driving a car, a BMW, because it's SAP is German, right? So going from riding a bike to driving a BMW, huge change in how you do things. You're learning a whole new set of rules and a whole new set of processes. This is like going from an older BMW to a newer BMW. It's a much simpler transition. We know a great deal more about what needs to be done, what the overall process should look like, what success looks like. This has a very different risk profile from the original implementation. And again, we've got a team of folks who are now experts in SAP. We know how to do this kind of project in a way that we just did not back in 2014.
Is that the vendor RFP, is that in the 170,000 or is that in the 9 million?
That's in the 9 million.
Mr.
And-
Koblis, did you have an additional question?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up, I guess more of a comment. I think I see Carla's white elbow over there. There she is. I just want to make sure, Carla, that this contract that we do with SAP is reviewed by maybe some software technology experts over in Amanda's office, just to make sure that, we've got all our bases covered on this. I just, SAP is a huge company and I just see some, again, I'm just gun shy. I don't want deja vu, that's for sure.
That would be you and me both. Don't want deja vu. So yes, definitely this would be a contract that would be reviewed by legal before we would bring it forward. Or before we would sign, I guess.
And Mr. Byers has a question?
Yeah, I have no interest in putting Loudon Water through more pain than necessary, but are there alternatives to SAP? And I'm just thinking about the procurement rules that Loudon Water has to adhere to. Do we need to look at alternatives before we spend this kind of money, or have we already done that?
So if we look at transitioning from SAP to some other platform and replacing the business functionality as opposed to abandoning it, there's really just a couple of options that we would be able to look. It would be something like moving from SAP to Oracle or to Microsoft Dynamics. There's one or two others out there. All of them would be on the order of the original implementation or more. So $20 million or more to implement, to replace, versus staying within the SAP stack and continuing to upgrade along those timelines.
Bill, I think you have Mike's eye twitching incredibly right now.
No, and I know that I am not advocating anything. I just know that, when you spend $10 million on something, we put things out for bid and, as Loudon Water does. And I have no interest in, I was chair of the audit committee the first year that the accounting folks got audited on SAP. And I know that was a rough year. So I don't want to have any pain. I just thought that perhaps there were rules we needed to follow and whether we had done that or not.
Yeah, I will say that I know of a number of, well, every other public agency. I'm pretty linked in with my peers in both in Virginia and a number of agencies across the country. And once you've adopted a system like SAP, it is far more typical that you're going to continue with SAP or that enterprise platform and continue to upgrade it. And so really the question and the competition becomes, who's going to help you through that upgrade, not whether you're going to change horses to another technology platform. Again, that comes with a great deal more risk and cost.
Is there training needed on that, on the functionality?
There will be training that will be needed. Yeah.
That's included in the.
That will be included in the services. We'll do some of it ourselves as well. And some areas will need less than others, right? There'll be just less change. Yeah.
How much of the training and data migration is actually done by SAP as opposed to third party people?
Most of it will be third party.
Okay.
Yeah. SAP is going to kind of take whatever they do, accept it into their system and run it, but getting us there, that's going to be where the third party comes in.
Yeah. And we're comfortable with a third party because we had issue with that back in 2014.
Yeah,
we're third parties.
I feel like our team is much better prepared to evaluate, select, and perform the governance that's needed to ensure performance from a third party. Yeah. And there's good contractors out there as well. Okay, I think that's my last slide. There's just a couple, just kind of reiterating some next steps. So these are our next steps, readiness improvements this year, the RFP that I've been mentioning, that will come to you late this year, early next year. We're, frankly, we have some flexibility exactly when we start, and we're going to be looking to exercise the maximum leverage that we can with our vendors, kind of time the end of their fiscal year. There's some advantages there. So that will drive some of our timing as we approach wrapping up this RFP process. And again, starting the upgrade in 2024 through 2026, and then those go live enhancements after that.
Great update. I think it's all wonderful. So I'm all on board. I know we've already allocated the money and all that, so that's great, but this is good. Makes sense to me.
Mr. Kobus has a question.
Yeah, it's just a comment. Mike, that was an incredible presentation. I mean, it was succinct, perfect. It was just excellent. I think that's one of the best I've seen since I've been here. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I agree. That was really good, Mike. Thank you. Really good.
Yeah, nobody nodded off or.
Yeah. I was hoping I wouldn't put you to sleep. Yeah.
9 million reasons not to nod off.
Yeah. I tried to avoid the jargon too. So
As usual.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Great
thanks,
job.
Mike. Very
Thanks.
well done.
Okay. The next item is an information item. It's the monthly financial summaries from Sally. Sally?
Good morning. January financials, we came in 0.9 million above our revenue forecast. Expenses continue to be under budget. And then ERCs were 292 for the month of January. Our forecast for the year is 2,350. And then cash and cash equivalents are 316 million with a weighted average of 2.3%.
Slowly creeping up.
It's getting there.
It's getting there. We're gonna get some of those one-year
Yeah.
notes at 5%.
That's right.
I mean, I think everyone should be buying those.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, with all that money you got lying around, just go buy some one-year notes. All right. Does anyone have any questions?
100%.
All right. Good job. Quarterly investment review.
Thank you. Good morning. This will be for the quarter ending December 31st of 2022. So we ended the year with a little over $318 million. And you can see the breakdown of our portfolio there. A large portion of that liquidity of 68 million is in our local government investment pool, which as of this morning is earning 4.89%. So you can see the trends. The average yield on the portfolio has risen significantly since the end of 2021. So, and our portfolio has gone up from 273 to 319 million. You may recall that big drop at the end of last year was due to the defeasance of bonds that we did. So we did have some maturities. We did roll off some robust 0.27% treasuries, and we're able to invest in $31 million at over 4%. So as Mr. Allen mentioned, we are starting to get some better returns. At the end of the quarter, LGIP was 3.53, and as I mentioned, as of this morning, it's up to almost 4.9%. So we'll continue to reinvest our money as it comes due and get much more higher yields than we have on the books right now. So that's the plan for this quarter. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Great.
Okay. The last item for today is the draft 2023 Finance Committee work plan.
Yes, so this is a draft. We have some flexibility on when some of these items come forward or if some of these items will be needed. So this is just a draft, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any about any of the topics that are listed here.
Looks good to me. Does anyone have any questions?
What's the Luckett's treatment plant thing? That was the one I was like. I don't
So
remember this.
I'll defer to Alton on this one. It may or may not be ready for next month. but
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. So we contract operate the wastewater treatment plant for Luckett's Elementary School, which also receives flow from the Luckett's Community Center and it did receive flow, well, it still does, the old volunteer firehouse there. And then the county recently completed the new firehouse for Luckett. So there are the 4 facilities. And as they worked through their process for bringing that new wastewater treatment plant online about a year or so ago, they were looking to take the old volunteer firehouse offline. And the entity involved with that facility petitioned the Board of Supervisors to try to stay on and stay connected to the wastewater treatment plant. And it became complicated for the county because that's not a government facility. And so by board member initiative of the Board of Supervisors, they've asked the county's General Services Department to look into solutions, options that could maintain those 4 connections on the system. And as they've looked at that, they've worked with us to say, can we make this a small system, just these 4 connections, and transition that wastewater treatment facility into ownership of Loudoun Water? In evaluating that along with County General Services, we've recognized that this board's policy is to implement the revenue equalization fee to ensure that defrays any operational expenses deficits that we would see in taking that plan on, both on the capital side and the long-term operating costs. So we're working through that right now with the county, and the timing of this item coming forward could be March or possibly later. And so right now we've presented the ref to the county and they're reviewing that. And what we would be bringing forward would be some potential options for how revenue equalization fee is implemented and paid.
And so that's being driven by the volunteer squad up there.
Mhm.
All right, yeah, all right. My wife was on the volunteer squad in Percival years ago. And
Okay.
they're a funny group. They're great people, but they're very proud of being volunteers, and rightly so.
They want their waste taken.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions on the work plan? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion adjourned.
Thank you.
We're closed.